This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, I'm Jean Shumway, Reference Librarian at Butler County Community College, and this video is the first in a series of videos for the PICO lab assignment. And in this video, I'm going to I'll give you an overview of the PICO lab assignment, and I'm going to discuss the annotated bibliography requirements, talking about annotations, APA style, and source requirements. So basically, your assignment is you have a PICO assignment, and you get to that from the Blackboard page in your nursing course. In either your Nursing 101 35 course, there is a PICO lab page, and I'll just exit the screen and show you how to get to that. So if you go to Blackboard, let me pull this up. Yep. 1 second, bring it over here. So if you open up your Blackboard page, and you open up your nursing course, within that course, you should have a link to what's called the Library Resources for Nursing. And I'm having this in my courses. You might have it listed in your courses, but it should also be in your Nursing 101 or Nursing 135 course on a link for that somewhere in there. And if you open up that, you will see a table of contents. From there, just open up Nursing 101 or Nursing 135. And then the first folder there is the Nursing 101 135 PICO Lab. And that has a lot of different resources related to evidence-based practice in this assignment, including this assignment and an APA style guide. But there's also other things like a PowerPoint presentation, things on formulating a question, things about resources, evidence pyramid, and some tutorials for searching. So I'm going to open up this assignment so you can see that, and we can talk about your assignment a little bit. Okay, bring that over and enlarge this a little bit for you. So you should have already started out your PICO lab, the first page, where you have to identify a clinical question. And basically in this part, you're not writing your question here, you're writing a paragraph describing that question. So just write a paragraph about the problem that you see. So I shouldn't say question here as much as what's the problem that you see. So discuss that. And then you take that problem and you determine the population intervention comparison outcome. And then you take that and you make it into a PICO question. So this is a single question. This is a paragraph about the problem. If you need help doing that or want some information about that, there is a separate tutorial, video tutorial on doing PICO. So then the next part of the assignment, the next page is what I'm going to be discussing here, is your annotated bibliography. So the requirements of the annotated bibliography is at first it has to be an APA style, which I'll give you a little bit of review in a moment. And then you need to have at minimum of 5 sources. So you need at least one book source, and I'll talk to you about finding your book sources. You need at least one web source. And you can do just a Google search, or you could go to different websites, and here are some that are recommended. You need an article from PubMed, and you need to find a research article from PubMed. An article found using CloudSource, and then an article found using either Ovid Nursing Collection or the EBSCOhost database. So at least 5 sources. And then each of those sources has to have an annotation, which I'll talk to you about now. I'm going to close this and get back over to my presentation. So you need to, so that's, and then I'll talk to you about the annotated bibliography moment. You also need to briefly summarize your findings in a paragraph. So your annotated bibliography and a paragraph summarizing your findings. So again, the annotated bibliography has to have these 5 sources, and it has to have an annotation. So what do I mean by an annotation? It means that you write a paragraph under each source in the bibliography, and that annotation should both summarize the contents of that source and evaluate it. And this is very important. Evaluation means you have to say why you chose that source. How is it related to your topic? What makes it a quality source? Why is it included in this bibliography? All right, so you need to do that, and it needs to be in correct APA style. So I have a link here to All at Purdue, and they have some examples of an annotated bibliography. So this is basically what it looks like. It's going to have your citation in APA style, and then indented below, directly below that, is an annotation about the source and why you selected it. And here's another example. And notice that it's indented. So the citation is a hanging indent, and then the annotation below it is a blocked indent, blocked and indented below it. So that's the format that you need to use for that. APA style, I'm going to open up the APA style guide and just review this just a little bit. APA style has recently changed just a little bit in the area of listing the authors. So it's very different from MLA style if that's what you're used to. You list the author's last name followed by their initials. If you have more than one author, you just list all the authors, last name first, followed by the initials, and then before the last author, you put an ampersand. If there are 21 or more authors, so you list the first 20 authors. That's very different. I think MLA style, you list 3 at the most. In APA style, they say you list 20 authors. If there's more than 20 authors, you put in an ellipses after the 20th author, and then you list the last author. So when you're looking at scientific articles, sometimes they have numerous authors, and they used to have you list fewer, but now you basically almost list all the. It's really rare that you're going to have more than 20 authors. So think that you're probably going to be listing all the authors. Okay, so then the format for different styles for different sources. Mostly what you're going to be citing is articles. So articles have 3 different options for citing them. There's the DOI format, there's database format, and there's URL format. Basically, if the article has a DOI number, which is basically an identification number, and you'll see that within the citation, then you include the DOI number. If it does not have a DOI number, if that's not included in the database, such as if you find it on EBSCOhost, they don't usually include the DOI numbers. So there's a DOI number. If they don't have that, then you could list the database name at the end, like EBSCOhost. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Or you can list the URL. So if you find it on a website, you list the URL. If you find it within a database, just list the database name. So in this example, I found it in the Ovid Nursing Collection database. In this example, I found the article online, so I just put the web address in. And in this example, there was a DOI number, so I put the DOI number at the end. Beyond that, they're all the same. You list the authors first. All right. If there is, sometimes you might have a corporate author, such as Mayo Clinic or Center for Disease Control. Sometimes they don't have individual authors, and then it becomes an institutional author. So if you don't have an individual author, put the institution first. Then you list the date of publication. So here is, in this example, here's the date of publication, and that's in parentheses. Then you list the title of the article, and notice it is in sentence format, which means the first word is capitalized, if there's a colon, so this is the title and this is the subtitle, then the first word of the subtitle is capitalized, but otherwise no words are capitalized unless it's a proper name or proper noun. Notice different than MLA style, this is not put in quotes. Then you put the title of the journal, and this is in italics, and then it has caps. All right, all the important words are capitalized except for things like a preposition or things like a article. You put the volume number of the journal, the issue number in parentheses, and then have a comma after that, and then the pages. And then you put a period and the DOI number. So if you just follow this example, you'll be fine. Also, a lot of the databases, you can copy and paste them and choose the APA format. So you can also just do that in a lot of cases. So that's how you cite articles. For books, you just need to put the authors, same format, the year the book was published in parentheses, the title of the book in italics and in sentence format. So notice this word isn't capitalized. In parentheses, you put information about the book, like its pages or down here you can see it's volume or edition information, and then you put the name of the publisher. If you have a chapter from an edited book, that means that the editors have collected chapters that are written by different people. If that's the case, you put the author of the chapter, the year the book was published, the title of the chapter, and notice that is the same as like an article title. It's in sentence format. Then you type in, you put the editors of the book, followed by EDS, you put the title of the book, book information, and then the publisher. If it's book from a database, a library database, just put the name of the database at the end. All right. So that's basically about citing books. And the last option is a web source. So web sources are actually pretty easy. You put the authors, date published, the title of the document, and the URL. And actually you don't have to say retrieved from anymore, you just say URL. So here's an example, authors, year published, and notice the title of the document or the page is in italics, and it's sentence format, and then here is the URL for that. So that's all you have to do for that. And again, sometimes, especially in websites, you might not have an individual authors, so you might have an institutional author instead. Just look and see who is the publisher of the website if you don't have individual authors. So that's a quick review of APA style. And again, you're going to find this APA style guide in that Blackboard page about PICO. So going back to the presentation and moving on to finding the evidence. So sources that you need to find are going to be answering both background and foreground questions. And where you go for information really depends upon whether your question is a background or foreground question. So books are a great source for background question. And this is either both books that are your regular books and also reference books such as encyclopedias or subject encyclopedias. They are usually more general questions, more introductory questions when you're getting to know a topic, and they help you understand the bigger picture surrounding your specific question better. So when you're trying to find your book source, you're going to find a source that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but it provides information about the bigger picture surrounding your question. So if you have a question related to pressure ulcers, the background question might be, what are pressure ulcers, or what causes pressure ulcers? Okay, so that's where you're going to go for your book source to answer your general questions, background questions. Where will you find your book sources? We have a number of resources at the BC3 library for that. We have a collection called Nursing Made Incredibly Easy. That is a journal, but it also is a collection of ebooks on different topics. You can go to the BC3 library catalog and find print books, and it will also link to some of our ebooks. We have some ebook databases. One is the ebook collection and one is called eBook Central. So those are both different collections of online books. And then we have a couple of reference books collections, which are really a nice way to answer different general questions. And Salem Press and Credo Reference are both collections of reference books. And I will talk to you about these in another video. So when you're finding articles, those are generally for foreground questions. Foreground questions are more specific focus questions like your PICO questions. So these are the sources that are actually going to answer your question. So examples of foreground questions would be things like, do specialty mattresses reduce the incidence and severity of pressure ulcers? Or, that's the only source, that's the only example I have. And this says also, books and some web sources may also provide foreground information, but the biggest source you're going to have is the scholarly journals for that. So to find articles, you need to use what's called a periodical index. So what is a periodical? A periodical is a publication that's published periodically. For example, daily, weekly, or monthly. And examples of that might be a newspaper that's published daily, or a magazine that's published weekly, or a journal that's published monthly. So your next question might be, well, what's a periodical index? A periodic index indexes the contents of a collection of periodicals. So while our library catalog might tell you which periodicals we subscribe to, might say that we have a subscription to Nursing Made Incredibly Easy, it doesn't index the contents of that. And what you want to find is an article within that journal And so you need to go to a periodical index for that. So periodical indexes that you can go to are PubMed, which is the premier index to medical articles. It includes what you might have heard this term before, Medline, plus some other articles. Another database that we have is the Ovid Nursing Collection. It's a collection of full-text nursing journals. We also have EBSCOhost databases that would be relevant to your search, which include Academic Premier and Health Source Nursing Academic Edition. So there's two. There's also Health Source Consumer Edition that might be helpful to you. We also have CloudSource, which is an open access collection of resources, both books and journals, but mostly journal articles. And then Google Scholar is another good source. If you haven't used Google Scholar before, it basically limits your Google search to only research articles and books. So those are the resources that I'll be talking about in another video when I talk about finding articles. When you're looking for periodicals, another thing to think about is there are different categories of periodicals, and which category they fit in depends upon who their intended audience is. So popular journals or popular magazines, their intended audience is the general public. And these are okay for your topic, but they're not the best source for your topic. You probably want to upgrade to at least a professional journal or a scholar journal. Professional trade journals are written for people in a specific profession or trade, such as our journal Nursing Made Incredibly Easy. Research isn't published in these journals. They're more of a resource for news and information. They're sort of a secondary source. They take the research in an area and write an article that gives you an overview of it or examines it and explains it. So they're a great way to become more familiar with the topic. And then the third category of periodicals are scholarly or academic research journals. And this is where people publish their research. And for this project, you need to find at least one scholarly journal article. An example of a scholarly journal is the New England Journal of Medicine. So when you're looking at these articles, this I'm going to show you now. One way to identify if it's a research article is if its format is in the IMRAD format. IMRAD is an acronym that stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. And most research articles are in that format. So I'm going to pull up two articles for you and give you an example so you can see. So this first one I'm going to show you here is an example from Nursing Made Incredibly Easy. I'm going to make it a little smaller so you can see. So this is Neonatal Nursing Care 101. It's actually a continuing education article about neonatal care. And it's written by usually professionals in the field. These professional journals are, but this is really more of an informative article about the latest information about caring for neonates. All right. It does not have that IMRAD format. It's not divided up into introduction, methods, results, conclusion, discussion. It does have a short bibliography at the end, but it's nothing compared to what I'm going to show you now in the example of a research article. So here, I'm going to grab, this is an example of a research article from the New England Journal of Medicine. And if you look at it, most research articles begin with an abstract, and often the abstract, which summarizes the article, is divided into the different sections of the article. So you have a summary of the background, which is the same as introduction, the methods, results, and the conclusions. And then if I scroll down, here is the introduction or the background information. This really sets the stage, gives it context for this article. It discusses methods, which is what they did. So it describes exactly how their research study was conducted. And then if you scroll down and notice these tend to be pretty long, there's a results section that says what they found out, what the results of the study were. And then going down, and the results section often includes lots of tables and charts. And then finally, there's a discussion section that basically pulls it all together and says what it all means, what they found out. So this is an example of a research article. Another thing to note that the research articles usually have large, long lists of bibliographies or references at the end saying where they got their information and other related articles. So going back to the presentation, that's what you're going to need to find. You're going to be mostly looking for professional articles, and then you need to find at least one scholarly journal article. When you're looking at scholarly journal articles, there is a hierarchy of evidence. Way at the bottom of the hierarchy are animal and laboratory studies. Okay, so you can see the bottom of this pyramid is animal laboratory studies. Going up that pyramid, you'll have individual studies. These might be qualitative case control or cohort studies, or they might be quantitative randomized controlled trials. And at the top of the pyramid are the meta-analyses and systematic reviews. And these are considered the gold standard because what they do is they look at a number of different studies and analyze them and come up with an overall results for them. So that is the end of this presentation. The next presentations will be about more specifically about how to access the BC3 library resources and how to search the different databases.